So here's part 3 of the 1.8 notes. We're going to talk about how can we use the quadratic formula to solve a word problem. Okay, so earlier on in this unit, in 1.5, we talked about when an object is dropped. And we have the following formula. We have h equals negative 16t squared plus h naught. Remember, h was the final height, and then h naught is your initial height. Now we're going to be talking when objects are launched. So this is actually when we create the parabola. So h, once again, is our final height. T represents the time, and this could be in seconds, hours, minutes, just depending on the problem. Now the new part is our middle. We see v and then the 0. This means v naught. We say this is our initial vertical velocity. And then, of course, h naught is our initial height. So this is the formula we're going to be using whenever an object is launched. Okay, let's look at example 5. It says a juggler tosses a ball into the air. The ball leaves the juggler's hand 4 feet above the ground and has an initial vertical velocity of 40 feet per second. The juggler catches the ball when it falls back to the height of 3. How long is the ball in the air? Okay, so here we know, if we're thinking about a juggler, right? We are thinking we have a person. Sorry for my lovely stuff here, my pictures, they're not the best, but I do what I can. So we have the juggler, he has the ball, he takes it, and then he catches it, okay? So notice that we do make a parabola here, so that means we are launching something. So we are going to use the h equals negative 16t squared, and then plus our v naught, plus our h naught, okay? So now we need to plug values into here. Now notice what it's asking us to, how long, okay? When we think about how long, what are we trying to solve for? We are trying to solve for t, or for time. Okay, that means we will need to plug something in for h, the v naught, and our h naught, okay? So h represents the final height. Where, basically, does this juggler catch the ball? Okay, well, it says basically in the second to last, the juggler catches the ball when it falls back to the height of 3 feet. So that's where I'm going to put that. Now, of course, we just have negative 16t squared. We will always have to have that. That deals with physics here. So now we have v naught. That's our vertical velocity. Now, it will always tell you what the initial vertical velocity is. It will not, you don't need to calculate that. In this case, our initial vertical velocity, they tell us, is 40 feet. So at plus 40, don't forget your t. Now the initial height, it says the ball leaves the juggler's hand at 4 feet above the ground, so at plus 4. So now we can use the quadratic formula to solve. Now remember, when we are using the quadratic formula, we need to make sure this is set equal to 0. So that means we need to move that 3 over to the other side, so it is set equal to 0. So I have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 40t plus 1. Let's label our A, B, and C values. A is equal to negative 16, B is equal to 40, and C is equal to 1. Now let's use the quadratic formula. So we have x equals our opposite of b, so that's b negative 40. And then plus minus 40 squared minus our 4 times our a, which is negative 16, times our c value, all over 2 times a. Okay, now we're going to plug in what we have into our calculator here, okay? Now, in this case, we can plug a lot of things into our calculator. Let's go ahead and just plug what we have underneath the square root into our calculator. So we have 40 squared minus 4 times our a value, which is negative 16, times our c value. Okay, we get 1664 here. So we have x equals negative 40 plus minus square root of 1664 all over negative 32. Now, usually we try to then just take the square root. Now, because this is a real world problem, would it really make sense to try to, simplify our square root? No. So in this case, it's okay to get a decimal answer. So this is how we're going to do it so we can get our decimal answer. So I'm going to go ahead and separate what I have into the plus and the minus. So I have x equals negative 40 plus square root of 1664 over negative 32. So we'll figure out what that is. And then my other one is I have x equals negative 40 minus square root of 1664 all over negative 32. So we're going to plug both of these into our calculator, and we're probably going to get decimal answers, which is okay. So let's do the first one. So make sure you're doing this where you're using parentheses. If you are using a scientific calculator, then you will have to use a lot of parentheses, okay? So let me kind of just use that because I know a lot of you have a scientific calculator. So here we're going to have our parentheses. We're going to have negative 40 plus, then we're going to do our square root of 1664. Now, if you're using a scientific, you might have to do additional parentheses here, okay? Then we end our parentheses, and then divided by negative 32. Here we get negative 0.02. And I'm just going to round to 3 decimal places, so we have that, okay? Okay, now let's go ahead and do the next one. So we're going to do the same thing. Plug it into your calculator. Move this over so we can see it. There we go. So once again, use parentheses. So I have negative 40 minus square root of 1664. And if you're using a scientific, you will have to use parentheses. Like you'll have parentheses, and then in yours, you'll have parentheses for the square root. Make sure you add 2 parentheses at the end if you're using a scientific calculator. If you're using a graphing, you can just basically do 1 set of parentheses. And then divided by negative 32. And we get about 2.52 here, okay? Now remember, we're thinking about time, and this is a real world problem. Which one would make more sense? Would a negative or a positive? Yeah, a negative would definitely not make sense to have for time. So really, we only get one real solution here. So our final answer is going to be 2.52 seconds, and don't forget that unit. Okay, if you have any questions, make sure you contact me, and make sure you work on the homework assignment. See you guys later.